Create WBS. This is a process of subdividing or decomposing the project deliverables and project work into smaller, more manageable components. A couple key aspects of the work breakdown structure. A very important piece of this is the 100% rule, which is that every piece of work gets included. It's very important that we do capture everything within the WBS because this is going to be our starting point as we'll do further decomposition in subsequent planning processes to come up with our estimates for what type of resources and how much money we're going to need to complete the work. So if the work is not captured as part of this process, then it won't be scheduled and it won't be funded. Now, does that mean that we don't have to do the work? No, we're still going to have to do it. But now it's going to be a matter of trying to go back and ask for more money. That's obviously not a good look as a project manager. The lowest level that we will see on the work breakdown structure is the work package. We're going to talk about the definition of a work package in a couple slides, but the word I really want you to associate with WBS is deliverable. All right, we are concerned about the product, service, or result that this project was undertaken to create. Tools and techniques include decomposition. So when we talk about decomposition, we are breaking down that project work and those deliverables into more manageable pieces. So it'll be much easier than to try to look at the whole altogether. If we were to turn around and say that we're building an 80-story skyscraper, that'd be very difficult to try to account for all of the money and all of the time and to try to schedule everything out. So what we want to do is we want to start looking at the various aspects of that skyscraper. What are the different components of our deliverable? And then we can start coming up with numbers. How long will it take to create that part of it and how much money will it cost? So there's 5 basic steps to decomposition. We want to go ahead and start by identifying and analyzing the deliverable that we're trying to create and the work that will be involved. Now, a lot of this was done for us already as part of the defined scope process when we came up with our project scope statement. We want to structure and organize our WBS. You'll notice in your PMBOK that there are numerous ways to structure and organize a WBS. Within your scope management plan, you should have some type of guidance as the plan tells you how you would do all of this. Different organizations have different needs, so it really is a matter of choosing what is most conducive to the project work that you're undertaking. From here, we will decompose the WBS into lower level components. So we're going to start with the deliverable up top, and then we will break it down to categories, subcategories, and keep going from there. We will assign unique identification codes. It's called a code of accounts. With these unique identification codes, typically they're numeric. However, sometimes it may be an alphanumeric. So it may be 1.3.5 or it could be 1.b.2 or something along those lines. But what we want to have is for every piece of the WBS, everything gets its own unique identification codes. That way there is no confusion. And we want to verify that we have a sufficient level of breakdown and completeness. As we start looking at the WBS, I'm going to give you a couple tips on how you'll know when you get to the bottom of it, when you get down to that work package level. So here we have a graphical representation of what a WBS may look like. For those of you that have used project management software in the past, this is going to look very familiar. Some of you may have never seen a work breakdown structure before, and this is a pretty good representation. So at the top, we have our business intelligence project. That is our deliverable. This is what we are trying to do. From here, we have various categories that we had possibly pre-selected as part of our scope management plan. And then at the very bottom here, we have our work packages. These are the things that cannot be further decomposed. We do have an ability to do scope decomposition using a product backlog. For those of you with an Agile background, this will look immediately familiar. So what we have in the table below, we have a unique identification, so it just looks like sequential numbers, 1 through 6. We have a user story. So typically with a user story, anytime we are using user stories, we want to start with a persona. So as a blank, I want to do something so I can receive some type of value or benefit. And what that does, it kind of explains to the people that have to go ahead and do prioritization here or to figure out exactly how to deliver on this. They can kind of look at, well, who's going to be using it? How are they going to be using it? And why are they trying to use it in that way? So that's going to give them more information than just a very basic requirement. For our estimates, we see that estimates go 1, 2, and 3. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean 1 day, 1 hour, whatever else it may be. This is typically done through relative estimation, and we will revisit this concept as part of perform qualitative risk analysis. So we're just trying to compare different things to put them in some type of order based upon their relative size. The human mind tends to have a lot of trouble coming up with a very specific number. If I were to ask you, how much does the average chicken weigh? You will probably be able to give me a decent range. But if I point to one chicken in the barnyard and I say, how much does that chicken weigh? You might be able to get close. But then if we look at a cow and I say, how much does that cow weigh? You might be within 100 pounds. And if we see a pig walking by and I say, how much does the pig weigh? You still might be close. We might be spending entirely too much time trying to figure out exactly how long these various user stories will take or how much these barnyard animals weigh. Instead, I might just look at you and say, from heaviest to lightest, cow, pig, chicken. And right there, we just did relative estimation. From here, we can also come up with a priority. So we go ahead and we prioritize based upon value received and also the amount of effort. One of the mechanisms that they use for this is taking the weighted shortest job first. So what is going to give us the most bang for the buck? What is going to give us the most value for our customer? So outputs from this process, we have our completed scope baseline. So we'd already discussed our project scope statement as part of the defined scope process, but now we have the other two components as well. We have our completed work breakdown structure, which we've discussed as being that hierarchical decomposition of the total scope of work to be performed. There are many different ways to go ahead and break down this work. The PMBOK lists many of them, but it could be by phases of the project lifecycle, major deliverables, sub-projects, or other ways. We also have our WBS dictionary, which is a companion document to the WBS. With the WBS, it is a graphical representation, so it's going to be as detailed as it gets. But if I'm looking at that and I say, I want to know more about 1.4.3, tell me about that work package, we can go ahead and open up that WBS dictionary. That's where you can start telling me about associated activities. How long will those activities take and how much would they cost and when are they supposed to begin? What type of resources will be used, what type of quality requirements, what type of high-level milestones, or anything else that we might decide to go ahead and capture within that document. With our project documents updates, we might go ahead and update our requirements documentation or our assumptions log in any way that may be necessary after completing this process. So some terminology, and I will really stress the terminology here because this really does become a make or break type of situation for the exam. Some of these terms sound very similar, but they cannot be used interchangeably. So a control account, this is a point that we establish on the WBS. Now, we define where the control accounts go as part of our cost management plan. These control accounts, and we have to have at least one, and if we only have one, it's going to be at the very top because every work package has to be assigned to a control account. We can have as many control accounts as we want, but we want to go ahead and keep it as organized as possible. These control accounts, this is where we go ahead and evaluate the work that must be done versus the amount of time that we have to do it versus the amount of money that we've allocated for it. This allows us to go ahead and make more informed decisions through the use of earned value management. If I were only to tell you that we completed 40% of the work, that doesn't tell you anything about whether we're ahead of or behind schedule or above or below budget. So by looking at all of these things brought together, the control accounts will allow us to make more informed decisions. Planning package. This is a component below the control account, but above the work package level. This is where we know that we have to do some type of work, but we haven't really planned it all out. So rolling wave planning is what we're using as a technique, and we know that we will get there. We know that there are activities that must be done, but right now we're not necessarily concerned about it. We're concerned more so with those near-term activities that we have to deal with. A work package is the lowest level of the WBS. This is where we're going to be able to make some of our best estimates for cost and duration. This is one step removed from an activities list, which is considered a separate document. One of the ways I like to help explain how you can know that you are at the work package level, I like to tell people about mashed potatoes. If our deliverable is cooking a family dinner, We can go ahead and start looking at the categories. Maybe we have appetizers, entrees, vegetables, desserts. And if we go under that vegetables category, well, we can start talking about the different types of vegetables we'll have. So maybe we have salad, green beans, of course, our mashed potatoes. Now, when we get to mashed potatoes, that is still part of your dinner. That is a component of our deliverable, without a doubt. Can we further decompose mashed potatoes? Absolutely. But we're going to be decomposing them into ingredients or activities. There's no way to decompose it where it's still an edible component of the meal. At this point, I'll tell you that we need so many baby red potatoes, we need so much butter, so much salt, water, the stovetop, we need the pot, we need to go ahead and start preheating everything. And none of that is a deliverable. That is work that must be done, or those are resources that are required to create that component of the deliverable. So once you get to that mashed potatoes level, you don't want to fight it. You don't want to try and force it any further. You can just go ahead and accept that, okay, from here on, it becomes resources, it becomes activities. And we will do that further decomposition in a few more processes once we get to define activities. We have our code of accounts, as stated previously. It's whatever numbering scheme we come up with. Most of the time it is strictly sequential numeric using decimal places. Sometimes it may be an alphanumeric. It's whatever your organization believes would work best. And we have our chart of accounts. So the chart of accounts is how we're going to track the money. For those of you that have any experience with accounting software, within one bank account, we can go ahead and have basically sub-accounts that exist only within our software. So we can look at and say we've spent so much on this and so much on that. Meanwhile, we've allocated so much for this, so we're over budget in this area, under budget in that area. And this is not actually part of the WBS. This is something that we will be using in conjunction with our control accounts to try and see exactly where we're at. Where are we over? Where are we under? Where are we performing well? And where could we stand for some improvement? So we just finished talking about creating the work breakdown structure. A quick learning assessment, describe the purpose of this process in your own words. Now, basically, we're just trying to break this down and graphically show all of the components of the project work. In what other planning areas will the WBS be helpful? When we are planning our costs, trying to identify and handle risk, resource estimation, also scheduling. What might happen if the work breakdown structure is not accurately prepared? If we do not prepare this properly and we miss some work items and we do not succeed in meeting that 100% rule, that does not mean that we don't have to do the work. It just means that we do not have time or money allocated to do that work. So we will have some pretty negative second and third order effects. What is a control account? A control account is a management control point where we're going to make a comparison between the actual cost, the schedule, and the scope to see if we have any variances there. Are we ahead of or behind schedule? Are we over or under budget, and so on? What determines the way in which the WBS is organized? The scope management plan would state how the WBS is organized, and if not, if we don't have that in there, then the project manager will just go ahead and decide. How far should a piece of work be decomposed in the WBS? Work should be decomposed to the point where discrete portions of the deliverable are identified, but any further decomposition would result in activities. So again, think about your mashed potatoes here. That's still a part of our dinner. We can still eat that, but going any further, we're either looking at activities or we're discussing the resources that we need for those activities. What are some things we would document in the WBS dictionary? The WBS dictionary would include things like the schedule milestones, cost estimates, description of the work, maybe a code identifiers. It's as much information as we believe that we would need.